Right.
Hello.
Well, we'll kick this off. Thank you so much for joining me. This is kind of the beginning of something we're hoping will become a bigger thing. So we're just going to take this opportunity to get to know a lot of people throughout the business and get to know their history. So we obviously know you as our CEO and sort of the main man within the business, but we just hopefully through these next 20 minutes or so we'll dive into a little bit more about how you got to that position and what sort of key journeys you've made along the way and impart a bit of knowledge hopefully. So for those of you who may not know yourself, Mark, would you mind introducing yourself and who you are?
Well, for those that don't know me, I am Mark Derry. I'm executive chairman of the group, formerly CEO, but as Richard has moved up to managing director, they're very slowly pushing me out towards pastures. So there you go. Yeah. So I've probably been around the longest out of everybody, um, and was really the founder of the group as it is today, I suspect.
Okay.
So a little bit of my background, if that helps, Mikey, or
Yes, please. Yeah, I
um,
was going to say the next thing I want to know is take us back to way back when. Where did it all start for you and what was your journey?
when I was a child, I was actually born in Herefordshire, but had the foresight to leave when I was about four, and ended up in Manchester, where my father worked in various parts of the booze industry, and that's where I got my terrible habit of supporting Manchester City, which has actually turned out not to be too bad these
Quite
days. But there
favourable at
you
the
go.
moment, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't always like that, you can imagine. Anyway, he moved up to Scotland, where he worked for Bell's Whiskey, and I moved up there and had the latter parts of my education were there. So I was in an academy in Scotland, and I went off to a college for a year where I got slightly disenchanted and decided that I'd go off and work for a while, perhaps to go back and study. But in fact, I never did go back. So I ended up working, doing various jobs, which by the time I was about 21-ish, I ended up working on the oil rigs on the drill platforms up in the North Sea.
Oh wow.
Worked out of Stavanger in Norway, worked in the gas fields out of Norwich and out of Aberdeen for quite some time. This again was a temporary arrangement, which ended up lasting 3.5 years. So I spent some time doing that. It paid incredibly well for a young man, and whilst it wasn't the most inspiring job, it's kind of like factory work out at sea. It was okay, and I had 6 months holiday a year, and made a lot of money while I wasn't on holiday. But at the end of it all, had less money than when I started, which wasn't exactly what the plan was. But there you
That's a sign that
go.
you enjoyed it.
Well, it was a bit of a drug in that my last job paid me about 40 grand a year, which back then was an enormous amount of money. But when I left, I joined Whitbread and got paid 8 grand a year. So you can imagine how difficult it was to go from one thing to the other. Anyway, I joined Whitbread and had a really enjoyable career. I started off in free trade, which is selling beer to pubs, and actually ended up through various strokes of luck working in the United States for 3 years, and then
Oh
came
wow.
back to the UK, and latterly ended up being the marketing director of TGI Fridays.
And what were you doing over in the States?
So I originally went out in a sales function. Whitbread owned some companies out there, so I went out in a sales function, and I very much wanted to move over to marketing, but there was a little bit of learning to do first. So very kindly, Whitbread paid in part for some education for me out in the States, and actually I ended up being a brand manager working on wines and spirits. And in America, our biggest brands were doing 1 million cases a year, and we had budgets of 30 million per brand, sort of stuff on the big stuff. So it was really interesting. It was a hell of an education. And then I came back to the UK, having trained in marketing somewhat, and ended up, as I say, as marketing director of Fridays, and that's how I really ended up being in having a youngish career in marketing. So it's quite a movement from drilling wells in the North Sea
Yeah.
to, to selling chicken wings at Fridays, but nonetheless, it's good fun.
And Fridays was obviously back in the day the kind of main place to be, wasn't it? It was, from what I understand, the people who were setting the tone for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, that's right. It was a franchise business from the US, and it was really important that Whitbread had the franchise because with it came a series of rules that didn't allow Whitbread to really tamper with it too much. It had to be literally it had to be delivered whole. So in that, I mean that they told us what interiors we had to do, and they had an extraordinary dedication to service,
Yeah.
which at the time in the UK was pretty much unheard of. The consequence of that is that it was tremendously successful, particularly in a sales sense. You know, the big sites were doing 100,000+ a week.
Wow.
This is back in the early 90s. So amazing business, really, really good, really successful, a hell of a lot of fun. But the most amazing trainer, and it was, those people that were in Fridays, and there's still a few around.
Yeah, I was going to say
You
we've
know,
had a few, haven't we? That I know Jeremy Brown and Ray Weeks have been there, haven't they? I imagine even more.
yes, that's right, and you can tell from those guys that they've got a pretty detailed background and knowledge in what they do. Ray was a bartender when I was marketing director, so he's not as young as he looks. Yeah, and from there, actually, I mean, in truth, I got a boss who liked me really even less than I liked him, which was quite an achievement. So he only one person's ever going to win that, and so I left and joined with some friends, and we ran a small business which ultimately acquired some pubs, and we developed those pubs, and then we sold them on. And then I had a small break and began a business with some of our now colleagues called Lockfine, and we launched a business called Lockfine Restaurants, which went on to be very successful, very good. And with it, actually, we acquired the first Petit Blancs from Raymond Blanc. And that became the base plate from which we've now developed Brasserie Bar Co.
And
And to be honest
if you
with
don't
you,
mind me saying at this point that we had this discussion a few years ago, and so Lockfine, just go back to that. I believe you joined when there was a couple of them, and eventually got up to around 36 restaurants. Is that right? Something along those lines.
well, yeah, we got Ian Glynn, who was the former chairman of Bar Co. He and I had been involved in the pub business before, and frankly, we both needed a job, so we decided that we would set up another restaurant or pub business. Everybody at that time was doing pizza, so it was really pretty dull. And in fact, it was around the time of BSE, which meant that the steak was effectively poisonous. So we decided that we would do seafood. Now, when I say we decided, I think my wife told me to, which inevitably
Meant you did it.
meant I did it, as many of us will know. And we looked at a few things, and we decided to go out and find some sites and try and do some seafood restaurants. At that point in time, the guys from Lockfine, which is obviously the place up in Scotland, contacted us and said, why don't we do this together? So they had opened a couple of little restaurants in England. To be honest with you, they made no money. One of them was an tiny inline shop in Nottingham, and the other was in a place called Elton, which is the gateway to Peterborough, as I like to refer to it. It's a kind of little village outside Peterborough. So they were not very successful. But the idea was that we would try and build up a group of seafood restaurants. So we went round all our friends with a collection tin, and raised a bit of money and opened the first serious Lochfine restaurant in Cambridge. And that site did, I mean, honestly, with the thick end of 30 grand the first week, never took any less than that, made a lot of money. And on the back of it, we managed to develop the whole of the Lochfine business, which we later ended up, a lot of people like Helen and Jeremy and what have you were involved in that business. And we were lucky enough to sell it later on for what was reported to be £70 million. So it was a successful business and development.
So moral of the story is you should listen to your wife more often.
Well, crikey, it's scarcely possible, I can tell you, but yeah, I think that's probably right. She probably takes responsibility for making the money, but she also takes most of the responsibility for spending it too.
True fashion. And I remember you said to me when you took over Brasserie Bar Co, what is now Brasserie Bar Co, that your logic was you didn't have 3 of the 4 locations. So if it wasn't to work out, you'd turn them into Lochfine. And if it was to work out, then great, you had a new potential franchise on the cards.
Yeah, that's precisely true. That is exactly right. It was a relatively low risk way of leveraging ourselves into another area of the market. And to be honest with you, it's been great. It's been absolutely fantastic. And in the way that we moved from seafood restaurants into brasseries, we then experimented with pubs, which was combined ideas of the various people like Richard and me and what have you, Ian Glynn again. And we tried a couple of pubs, but the concept was to put the brasserie menu into a pub, because I think we recognised that the heritage and the beauty of pubs was that it was part of the fabric of the UK community, but actually not always delivered to an amazingly high standard. So we decided that were we to be able to put good food into a pub, that there was a fighting chance that it would be well accepted. So we did that in Weybridge and Teddington, and with more help from more old friends like Thomas, the head chef in Teddington, we got the things off the ground, and they were a remarkable success. So now we have a two-pronged business. We have brasseries and we have pubs, and I think they're a really happy marriage. They tend to feed off each other, and they are both successful in their own rights. So we're genuinely thrilled that we've come so far, and in some of the most hostile trading environments of our lives. So.
And when you look back on all the years with BBCo, what's a standout moment for you that you think, wow, that was a real cracker?
Well, I've always felt that we have genuinely the best food and the best teams in the sector. But sometimes, you look at these businesses and you wonder if you could do more, and if there's ways of making them even more successful. And I think one of the things that dawned on us latterly, and to be fair, it's more to do with the rest of the team than me, is that if we were better at designing and interiors and what have you, that perhaps there was a potential for us to push them even further. And I think when that dawned on us and we started doing some of the new generation of pubs, we genuinely have made really big steps forward, and we've got some extraordinary properties and a truly extraordinary business. So to put my finger on one incident is quite difficult, but that I think is the one thing that this evolution into the new stuff has been really important. The other thing that has struck me is that over the last few years, it has been increasingly difficult for us as a business to make money because we are in a very highly taxed and a very labor intensive business. And so we in our industry have been carrying the brunt of increasing national minimum wage. Quite rightly, we want everybody to be well looked after and what have you. But at the same time, have had a tax burden. And over many years, it has made it more and more and more difficult to be good at making profit. So the working environment in the Loch Fyne times, it was much easier to make money. Now, the reason I'm making this point is because when we went into this pandemic, it was all too easy to feel quite down on yourselves in this sector because every time we took a step forward, it was gobbled up in tax payments and what have you. And you left with the feeling that you're really not terribly successful. Well, I can tell you, as soon as the pandemic came around and we took various decisions, it became really apparent that as difficult as it had been for us, it was a damn sight more difficult for everybody else. Because right after March last year, businesses started collapsing and folding at an alarming rate. The amount of administrations and what have you was just extraordinary. And of course, you then realize that in fact it wasn't anything that we were doing. The environment was getting progressively more difficult, and we were doing incredibly well. It's just it didn't feel like it at the time. So I realized last year what an unbelievably strong team we have and what a fantastic business that we are really running. And here we are in the most difficult times that I have ever encountered. Certainly from an economic point of view, the last time it was this bad was probably the Second World War, and way beyond any of us remembering. And still here we are, and we are still sitting here tight and waiting to reopen and waiting to show off what we really can do.
Yeah, and you're right. It's almost taken a pandemic for us to take a step back and go, actually, we are bloody good at what we do, and we will continue to be for many years. All right. And in terms of your job, Mark, and what you do day to day, what do you love the most about your job?
What do I like the most? You know what, Mikey? What I like the most is seeing other people in the business genuinely successful and happy, and I love seeing other people, make things work well. The predominance of what's happened in this business during this pandemic has had very little to do with me and everything to do with the rest of the teams. The people teams are doing a phenomenal job in a really, really difficult environment. Rich and Chris and Henry and Harry and all the people that are left at work are doing a phenomenal job in the most difficult circumstances. And I can't tell you how grateful I am and how unbelievably proud I am to have been involved with these people. And in terms of a bit of advice to everybody, the one thing I would say in your careers, which one day will come back to being more normal and what have you, is always hire people who are better than you. Because I can tell you, it is very simple to hire people that are not as good as you, and then you can control them and oversee them and bear down on them. But if you get people that are much better than you, your golf handicap just goes through the floor. It's brilliant. So you can get out of the way and let them get on with it. And my greatest success is finding people who are better than me.
Love that. And I think it's the best leaders in any industry who are the ones who can identify that and be comfortable with someone being really good at something and embrace that. And as you say, increase that handicap, get the most out of it. All right, and then on to sort of future question for you. Obviously, you've mentioned this has been an extremely difficult time, the hardest I think we've ever seen for sure. And what does the future look like for you for BBCo, and what in your mind is the goals moving forward?
Well, I think we have to look at this in bite-sized chunks. I think the first thing we've got to do is overcome the short-term problem. And the short-term problem is trying to find a way of making sure that we get to reopen and relaunch the business without it running out of money first. And that is not an easy task. But you've got a strong group of people and incredibly diligent finance teams and structures, which will do our absolute damnedest to ensure that we get to the next stage, which is to get reopened. After we get reopened, and I'm confident we will, but after we get reopened, then we have to reestablish our business and make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to actually, very crudely, to make some money for the business in order to pay down some of the debt that is accumulated whilst being in lockdown. Because this is not funded for free. We are borrowing money to do it. And if we're very successful in the following period, we would anticipate that we will have a sensible tax regime which will allow us to make enough money to catch up again in 12 months or so. So it's all hands to the wheel, get everybody back to work, and all of us make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to try and to protect our future livelihoods and the livelihoods of the families which all depend on us. Once we get through that, if we're successful through all that, which I would anticipate that we would be, then we want to look to see what we can do to develop the business for the future and to start having proper long-term career aspirations for all of our senior people who deserve so much more. They deserve a life where they have they can achieve goals and enjoy the pleasures that you get from success. And I anticipate that will be down the road, finding a way of growing the business much in the way as we have done in the past, but perhaps using our, you learn something all the time, and we've got newfound knowledge, etc. And I very much look forward to getting back to that place. And to be honest with you, if we get back to that place, then it will be great for me, but I will be, more comfortable with stepping back even further. Many would say I've already stepped back quite a long way, but even further, and letting the younger guys get on with it, because it's a bit tiring for us old geezers, to be honest. So there you go.
I'm sure your wife's got many things ready for you to crack on with.
You've no idea.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. We're going to finish on just some quick fire questions here. These have absolutely no point at all, but they're a bit of fun. So, Marmite, love it or hate it?
Love it.
Oh, okay. Right, here we go. We're dividing opinions here. Red wine or white wine?
Both.
Okay. I thought you might say that. Right, we have a little
simultaneously, but one very quickly after the other.
Okay, in quick succession. We have a little game in head office that we do to boost the energy if it's ever feeling a bit low, which is Would You Rather. So I've got one here for you. Would you rather get away with lying every time or always knowing someone is lying?
Would I rather get away with lying every time or know that somebody else is lying?
Or always know when someone else is lying?
I would rather know when somebody else is lying.
Okay.
I usually do.
Last one for you.
When you get to my age, Mikey, you learn.
Yeah, I imagine you too, yeah. Right, last one for you. People often sort of say, go to your happy place. What's your happy place, Mark? Where's that place in your mind that you just cannot wait to get back to, or that you go just to get away from everything?
Well, as many of you will have known and experienced, including you, Mikey, my one luxury in life, and I can tell you, it took a very, very long time to get. But I've got a little house in the mountains, and I would rather be skiing every day than do anything else. And so I cannot wait to get back there, although it's looking increasingly less likely till next Christmas.
Well, I'll take that. At least if we can get you there at some point and get us all somewhere, then that'll be a win at this stage. Mark, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.